not everyone has again the time, the inclination to do the deep dive that maybe some of us has done, and that's okay. And yet, so many people again feel the sense something is wrong. If we'll just open the eyes a little bit to not trust the untrustworthy ones, the politicians and the economists and the central bankers who are, who we have invested our faith in are going to manage things for us. If we can return to some simple, basic principles, and then I think many people, even if they, aren't going to spend time reading economics books, can begin to understand what's just intuitively natural. Again, values created by people doing things. So how can a government create money out of nothing? It's just that simple. And when you have that light bulb moment, then you can begin to say, oh, maybe that's why this thing that seems crazy as Bitcoin, and you begins to see it more and more and adopt it, and more people are talking about it, not as just some get-rich-quick scheme.
Welcome, Paul Rogers, to the Larpar Show, where we talk about what is money, what is coming, and how to protect your family. So, Paul is the author of Money, Love, and Bitcoin, creating a path to a freer, fairer, and more peaceful world. This book is just really newly released, so it's going to be an amazing read for everybody out there. Paul is a former certified financial planner, wealth manager, and retirement coach whose independent practice emphasized sound, conservative investment strategies, as well as helping clients understand the deep meaning of money. After leaving traditional finance, he unexpectedly discovered Bitcoin and realized its potential to address many of the problems he observed in our existing monetary system. He trained in the science of yoga in India and has studied various wisdom traditions from around the world. His passion lies in integrating these experiences to envision new systems and possibilities to help us lead our best lives. He currently lives with his wife in Madeira in Portugal. We met there last year when we were over there for the Bitcoin Atlantis Bitcoin event, which was amazing. And so, Paul, welcome to the show. And if you'd like to just give a little bit of backstory about yourself for our audience, a lot of our audience might have seen you previously last year on this show, but now we're here to talk about your book. But give us a little bit of backstory about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks, Lawrence, and it's great to be sitting and talking with you again after meeting you at Bitcoin Atlantis, and thanks for all you do in the space. I mean, I think it's important that all of us are trying to contribute, and by giving a platform for the lots of different voices with different interests and ideas in the space is an important contribution. So thanks for letting me talk to your audience today and to talk to you. So. Yeah, as you mentioned, little backstory there. Before moving to Madeira and getting into Bitcoin, I spent 20 years in traditional finance as a financial planner, helping regular people. I was not a trader or a hedge fund manager. I was the guy who sat with people who were trying to figure out, how do I save money for my retirement? How do I manage it when I get there? And how do I not run out of money before I run out of life? And so, I was very much in the traditional financial world, looking at stocks and bonds and portfolio allocations. I was not someone who suggested people try to be venture capitalists and swing for the fences and get rich quick. It was about doing the right things to, accrue and build your wealth and conserve it so you could make the money do what you wanted to do with it. After some changes in my life and realizing that I wanted to return to some of the deeper issues that I had explored when I was a philosophy major in college, I decided that the world of traditional financial planning was something that I was ready to leave and to allow myself some spaciousness to see what might come next. And so I passed my practice on to another advisor. Took the opportunity to shortly thereafter actually go to India, where I had studied with a teacher for a while for some additional yoga training. And it was there that the COVID-19 pandemic really broke. And so I was there talking to my wife, who was back in Florida, where we had recently moved, and the stores were being boarded up. Things were locked down. We were locked down in India at the compound there, although very safe. And then I got back and I realized that everything that I had understood and the plans and the strategies that I had used to help my clients really didn't seem to make sense anymore. If you could have the economy shut down, corporations not being able to sell products, people not being able to go to work, and if the valuation of corporations and stocks is supposed to be based on their earnings, how could shut down an economy for months, at the very least, and have stock prices go up? So they tanked, originally, but then immediately started going back up. It's like, okay, whatever I thought I knew and whatever made sense no longer makes sense. And my real aha moment came when my wife and I had bought a house because we were planning to move internationally, but then with COVID, we couldn't go anywhere. So we bought a house, and in a year, the value of that house went up 25%. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is insane. Something is going on here. And sure, people could work from home and they're moving to warmer climates and all that, but I got the realization it's not that the value of my house was going up, is that the value of what you would be buying it with, in this case, dollars, was going down because of all of the money that had flooded the system. That's what drove asset prices, stock prices back up, real estate prices back up. And so that led me down to figuring, what could I do about this? What could I understand is really happening here? And that turned me into to a Bitcoiner when 4 or 5 years ago, when my wife had brought it up to me and said, what about this Bitcoin thing? Because she had this intuitive sense that something might be wrong here. And of course, being a traditional financial guy, I'm like, no, that's crazy. It's priced in dollars anyway. So, if the dollar goes down, we're going to be in trouble anyway. Well, I didn't understand. And the reality is, most people, even in the world of financial planning, wealth management, investment advice, don't really understand what money is and what's happened in our system in the last 100+ years. And so, the next 4 or 5 years was devoted to really understanding and learning that, and figuring out how I had to do things differently and hopefully be able to share that with others.
Yeah, yeah. It's some journey that a lot of us have gone on, yeah, from what we were used to and what it's a whole mindset shift, really, isn't it? When you really start learning about what is money and then you find out about the cost of money, yeah, the cost of capital, yeah. Would you like to dive into that a little bit, maybe, and explain to people about the
Sure.
cost of money,
So,
yeah? Because we've only really
I'm
discovered
sure.
all this, and there's a lot of finance people, even now I talk to, and they don't know this. They don't know about this.
Yeah. And I guess, there's lots of people that have done tremendous work, with lots of charts and graphs and lots of economic background and history that have explained this evolution of money, to get where we are. And you do need to understand that. But, the title of my book is Money, Love, and Bitcoin. And most people can kind of understand what money and Bitcoin have to do with each other. But this crazy word love in the middle, where does that come from? But it does start with trying to understand what money is. And here's the little piece that I frame it within the context that we move to about why love is important. And that is, an authentic money is a representation, just a technology, to represent something. Well, what is that something? That something is the value that we as humans contribute, whether we're growing food, digging rocks out of the ground and melting them into steel and building buildings, whether we're treating other people for their well-being, whether we're creating art or music, we are doing things that add value. And when others see that as valuable and want to exchange, since we live in a very large economy, we don't live in tribal systems where we can just share and barter with each other. We had to have this technology of money. But the origin of money is in people adding value. So how can we have a monetary system based on pieces of paper that a central bank or a government can create without adding actual value contribution? I mean, that's a money without integrity. And it's really just that simple if we can wrap our heads around that. But, we've all grown up in this system where money is just something that's represented by a piece of paper issued by a government. And so it seems normal, but it's anything but normal. And without even going into the whole history of gold or seashells or rhinestones or how we got here, if you just think of it as how can you have something that's supposed to be money when it actually has no contribution of value behind it? Instead, what you have is an extraction of value. And that begins to permeate our society and our culture and our economy in lots of different ways. So, a government or a central bank that creates money without value is actually extracting that value through the mechanism of inflation from all those who are really creating value. And then you get everybody so focused on just what's going to make money. How can I get more money? You begin to look at people who are extracting value out of the system just to make money. And it's an understandable thing, all right, but it doesn't contribute to humanity. So whether it's high frequency algorithmic, stock trading, that doesn't add any value to anybody. Foreign currency exchange, because of this crazy fiat system we have, it's necessary, but it doesn't really add any value to humanity. So I think we've got to return to thinking about, are we adding value or are we extracting value in everything that we do? And if we base our systems and our economies and our money on the real issue here, which is the contribution of value, I think the light bulbs begin to go off. And more importantly, we begin to reframe our entire economy and our system and our monetary systems so that everybody begins to think about not just how can I accumulate more money, but what am I doing to really add value? And if the system doesn't reward extraction of value, doesn't allow that to actually occur because of a new technology of money like Bitcoin, where you can't really do that. You got to expend real energy. You got to have real proof of work to accumulate Bitcoin. Then I think that begins to change everything.
Yeah. And just something to touch on there, what you were saying there. Yeah. Most people out there are working exponentially harder for a currency that's getting exponentially weaker over time. And people think they need to work more and work harder. Yeah. But they're actually, what they're getting compensated in is something that's getting weaker and weaker and weaker over time. Yeah.
Right, and it's a real travesty. And it's hard, we again, when you've grown up in a system where inflation has always been present to one degree or another, we've just been conditioned by all these experts to think that that's a normal part of systems. Well, it's not. I think Jeff Booth is probably one of the best explainers of this issue, which is that prices, because of technology improvements and productivity, should be falling to the marginal cost of production. Everything should be getting cheaper. So life should be getting easier. But because of this extractive system, it robs us all through this insidious tax of inflation. And that's the real travesty. We see it in all those YouTube and TikTok and Twitter videos of the moms behind the wheel of the car in tears because they're working as hard as they can, trying to raise their children, trying to do the right thing, and they just can't get ahead. And it's a travesty, unfortunately. And so I think everybody knows that something is wrong here. We sense it, we feel it. I think that's the reason why we have the rise of populist movements, whether it's to the right or the left. But most of those politicians start pointing fingers not at the real source of the problem, but in an easy explanation that people can get behind to blame someone, when in fact it's the whole system that's at fault. And until we begin to understand that, then we can't really put Bitcoin and a new system in perspective to think about how does this begin to solve the ills of an old system so that we can transition, hopefully not through conflict, but that we can transition to a society and a foundation upon which we can build, as the subtitle of my book is, a freer, fairer, and more peaceful world. Because that's what, to me, is really important about Bitcoin. And that's really the inspiration for my book, because I didn't see as much talk about that in this space as I thought there should be.
Yeah, yeah, great. And another thing that I'd like to touch on a little bit, okay? So, because people haven't done their homework on what is money, yeah, they're working more, they're getting compensated in this thing called money, or it's actually not even money, it's fiat currency. Yeah, big difference, different words. Yeah,
Yeah.
people should learn the meaning of different words. Yeah, but a lot of people just throw the same words around. Yeah, so we get
Mm-hmm.
compensated in this thing called fiat currency. And then there's a thing, right, that I know when I was growing up, my parents taught me work hard, yeah, put your money in the bank and save the money to maybe buy a property down the house, buy your first house or whatever, yeah. Most people don't realize that there's a thing called the half-life of money as well, yeah. And the half-life of money is running at about 5 years, yeah. Do you want to touch on that a little bit, yeah, and just explain a bit
Sure.
about that?
And again, having been in a certified financial planner and being in traditional finance, helping people and talking about a lot of that and helping people to understand what they knew, they couldn't just save money. And again, that's the real crime here, because there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to work hard, store the value of whatever you don't consume in a way that doesn't have a half-life to degrade. Instead, we're compelled to invest, to buy stocks, to buy bonds, to buy real estate, to buy art, whatever it may be. And those things all have a greater degree of risk than many people are really comfortable with. So they turn to experts, all right, and they want help. And that's, what I did for a long time. But most of my clients didn't really want to invest, okay? They just wanted to preserve the value of their money so they could use it in the future to, not have to work and still be able to eat and enjoy their life. And again, that's the real crime here. So it's propelled all these other assets to have a value much higher than their real utility value, their use value. And real estate's the primary example. So many people would say, when I've asked them, what's your favorite investment? Oh, it's my house. I bought it for $200,000 and now it's worth 400 or 600. And they think they doubled or tripled their money. And of course, they don't calculate the fact that they paid property taxes, interest payments, they did repairs on the house to really come up with an investment value. But because you can't save your money in the bank, in cash, in the currency, you're compelled to buy these other things. And the debt system allows you access to money to do that. We drive house prices way up. I mean, a 3-bedroom house has no more utility now than it did 50 or 100 years ago. So why is the price so much higher? It's simply because people are using it as a way to save money. All these people who have multiple houses and don't live in them. And I see this here where people from all over the world are coming in and buying properties, driving up the prices, driving up the so that the locals can't afford property anymore. And it's a shame. And it's because real estate's being used as a piggy bank when they could use something simple like Bitcoin instead. And when that happens, hopefully what we begin to see is a, a fall in prices that makes things easier, that makes real estate what it should be, a place to live, not an investment. It's a place to live. It's a place to grow your family. Okay. It's a place to enjoy life. Real estate should not be an investment, but it's been turned into one, and it's travesty.
Yeah, but as we know, it takes a little bit of time to learn that. Yeah, and you're not going to learn it on a 1 hour call or a 2 hour call. It takes a bit of time. Yeah, yeah, probably 20 or 30 hours of learning about what is money before you get that light bulb moment click in. Yeah, and
Yeah,
most people are too trapped in the wheel of going around and with this fiat system, the fiat currency system, that they just need to take a break and just have a look and start looking about what Bitcoiners have found out, yeah, and start doing their homework uh, on money, on life, on Bitcoin, on love, yeah,
yeah. And not everyone has again the time, the inclination to do the deep dive that maybe some of us has done, and that's okay. And yet, so many people again feel the sense something is wrong. If we'll just open the eyes a little bit to not trust the untrustworthy ones, the politicians and the economists and the central bankers who are, who we have invested our faith in are going to manage things for us. If we can return to some simple, basic principles, and then I think many people, even if they, aren't going to spend time reading economics books, can begin to understand what's just intuitively natural. Again, you values created by people doing things. So how can a government create money out of nothing? It's just that simple. And when you have that light bulb moment, then you can begin to say, oh, maybe that's why this thing that seems crazy as Bitcoin, and you begins to see it more and more and adopt it, and more people are talking about it, not as just some get rich quick scheme. And the arguments about it's a medium for criminals and all that stuff begins to wither away through its fallacy, that people can begin to embrace it, and we can hopefully move. It won't be overnight in a transition when these other systems begin to collapse of their own weight. And they'll try to keep them going as long as possible, obviously. But the United States, $36 trillion in debt. Obviously, it's never going to be paid off, and there's plenty of people who are collecting interest payments on that, the banks that really don't care whether it ever gets paid off. But sooner or later, people are going to figure out it's just crazy. You can't do this,
yeah.
and
It's just a
hopefully that's
spiral, isn't it? It's just a spiral. That's all. Unfortunately, it's a death spiral that we're going into, yeah, that we're
yeah.
in, yeah, and there's no way out of it, really, is there? Yeah, it has to just keep on
Well,
going, and the governments need to just keep on debasing the currency and keep on printing money to keep the whole wheel going.
yeah. And, again, it's a shame that the real issues aren't being talked about. Instead, we just have this dramatic polarization of blaming each other. And there's lots of faults on both sides. There's lots of, uncompassionate things that are going on throughout the world. But, there's 7.9999 billion people that want to see a different life. And, we're the ones that are all going to rise up and make that happen. And I think we're going to be, places in the global south, for example, that don't have the luxuries to not have to worry about it as much as those in Europe and the US have, where simply using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange is the best and only technology you have, and you can do it on your phone because you don't have access to banking. You don't have a currency which its half life is weeks or months, and you do it by necessity. And when that starts snowballing, it may come from places that are very different than just what Larry Fink and BlackRock are doing, but it's happening everywhere. And the more we can all contribute to it, the more we can help people understand that it's, again, about more than the money. And that's where that middle word in the title of my book, love, comes in, because there's that saying in the Bitcoin community, fix the money, fix the world. And I think, yes, we are going to have to fix the money as a new foundation for fixing the world. But in my view, any technology is subject to being distorted and corrupted and used improperly if the values behind the people, who are using it, are distorted and warped and corrupted and based on power and control, and not based on integrity, authenticity, and love. And so that's why I think it's important in this discussion of money and Bitcoin to return to a deeper value structure, more profound wisdom, and to help people understand that that is where this has the potential to lead us to. And, at first it might seem, this seems idealistic, or is this airy-fairy or namby-pamby? And I'm a real grounded guy. Again, I spent 20 years in traditional finance. I'm not a wooey person, but I've done enough work to also probe deeper beyond the surface of what we see. And, I think we need to have bold dreams. We need to have visions. We need to have people who are idealistic to create systems that are going to be more ideal systems. If we succumb to just fear instead of love, if we succumb to desires for power and control and centralization, then that's the type of systems we're going to build. It's what we have built, all right, for the last 100 or more years. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. The centralization, the control, the extraction of value. And whether you're a proponent of the fourth turning winter analogy, or similar strains, something is happening here. Change is going to happen. And those of us who want to be voices for a positive change need to be speaking up. And that was really the motivation for the book, is to get out of just all what I call, Ireland's not a baseball place, but the inside baseball, the inside football kind of thing about number go up, or what's happening with Fed liquidity, or what's happening on chain analysis and all that. That's great. That's wonderful. But that's not going to touch most people's hearts. It's not going to touch most people's lives. And it's not going to explain to them why we need to begin shifting to newer systems that are going to benefit them, not just make a few cypherpunks rich.
Yeah, yeah. And there is big change coming as well. I think there's a lot of hope as well now coming out of from the other side of the pond, yeah, from Australia. There's a new administration over there. They're moving very, very fast to to trying to there was a lot of damage done in the last 5 years, yeah, all over the world, yeah, with all this uh new ideology that started coming out of nowhere, basically, that was probably being centralized from somewhere and just being pushed out, yeah, into all countries, into Europe, into the UK, into America. We all seen it, yeah. And a lot of people who were shocked, yeah, about what was coming out. But hopefully now we have a bit of hope, and things will change that way. But people need to take a little bit of responsibility as well, themselves as well, pull up their big boy pants, yeah, and start learning about themselves and how to protect themselves, because I'm a firm believer that they can be changes in different administrations, different policymakers, but in the end of the day, we need to have it inside within us as well. We need to know what's going on and how to protect ourselves.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And, you know, politics is a difficult subject right now. And, I'm not going to go there other than to say exactly this. We need to assume some responsibility. We need to look into this a little bit more and realize that what we're being told, and whatever side we might sympathetically align with. And I know I've had to have a deep exploration of this. I mean, I also spent 15 years early in my career in government service. So I also have that side and an understanding, appreciation, and have many friends that are still there. And reassessing the balance where we are is a valid discussion. Now, a lot of people and things may get broken in that process. And right or wrong, or whichever side you come to, it's simply reassessing that. And I think, one of the big things in the Bitcoin space is a lot of talk about sovereignty, and it gets to that individual responsibility. And I think we have to balance this idea of sovereignty. I mean, the reality is no one is a sovereign individual. All right. I was talking with a big OG yesterday, and he said, yeah, I'll show you sovereignty. Let me drop you off a helicopter naked in the middle of the Amazon forest, and let's see how you do. You can't. That said, the important point there is that we are each unique individual beings with our own perspective, our own gifts and talents, our own ability to contribute to life, and our own experience and our own journey in life. And that has to be respected and valued. At the same time, we are part of an interconnected web of life, all right? We do not live alone, all right? Whether you choose to live alone off the grid or whether you choose to live in a commune, the reality is, all right, this universe is a system, and you are part of that system. To use the Bitcoin analogy, you're a node. If you have one node, it's pretty useless. Okay. It serves very little utility to anybody. But if you have a network of 8 billion people, which is what we have, and then every being on the planet and every tree and every shrub and every mushroom are all part of a system, then we can begin to think about the actions that we do as an individual. Again, take responsibility and recognize our connection to everyone else. And from that place, build systems. And again, most spiritual and religious traditions have that same perspective. Whatever that source may be, call it whatever you will, okay? There is an interconnected universe. It's true from quantum physics, the Eastern traditions, Abrahamic faiths. It's an interconnected, omnipresent, omniscient entity, whether it comes from the void, God, whatever you want to call it. And so if we step back and think about that and how we design our systems, how we think about our individual responsibility, and how we want to move as a society, I think that gives us a foundation to move from, rather than just what am I going to do to conquer somebody else and get what they have.
Yeah. That's a very good point there that you brought up there. Yeah. So listen, let's jump into the book now, okay? And we can talk a bit more about the book, right? So Paul, what inspired you to write this book and why now? Yeah.
Yeah. So again, spending a number of years in this space, reading all the books, watching all the podcasts and the great information. I was actually on the yoga mat one day, and most people think of yoga as like a gym class where you do flexibility exercises, but yoga is really a way of life. It's a much deeper wisdom tradition, one of the most ancient wisdom traditions on the planet. So it's a lot more than stretching exercises. And I was there on the mat, someone in meditative, and I realized it came to me, what's missing in this space is this discussion of the deeper, more profound values that need to be part of a new system that we create with a new Bitcoin foundation as a monetary system. But we need to have it based on these values, like what we're just talking about, the integrity and the authenticity of each individual within community, whether you're adding value or extracting value, and ultimately, whether we're basing our systems on fear of the other, fear of what may happen, fear of not getting our fair share, or love. And, there's many ways of putting that on a spectrum, but I think fear and love is a fairly good way of putting these polar opposites there in a way. And if we base our systems on love, if we base a Bitcoin standard on love, then that to me is the linchpin in moving from fixing the money to fixing the world. And I think if you ask most people, are you fearful about certain things? They could reel off a list. But if you said, what's the most important thing to you? Is it to love and be loved? Is it to love your family, your spouse, your community? What do you really want in life? Is a Lambo more important to you or love? I think they're going to say love. So why can't we begin to create systems based on love? Why shouldn't we embrace the possibility that if we can move to, a new foundation for our interaction, our economic transactions between each other, but move beyond a commercial mindset. I mean, there's many people I've heard and talked about everything in life is a transaction. Well, everything in commerce is a transaction. But if you take a commercial mentality to everything in life and treat everything as a transaction, I'm not sure you're going to have the best relationships with people. I'm not sure that your spouse or your children that's the basis that you want to have your relationship on. What am I going to get from you? It's in exchange for what I give to you. That's not the basis for human interaction. Commerce, sure. But we've got a system where commerce becomes everything and it consumes everything. And we see it again in our food supply, where it's just a transaction to create money, even if it's not if it's not commerce to create nourishment, in our healthcare systems, in our arts and architecture, and it all ends up into the time preference of realizing, do I just want it now? Or am I really willing to build something for the long term, for humanity, to contribute to that? And so it was these deeper values that really drove me to create the book and to add more in this space. And I'm beginning to see more of it and hear more of it and find some people to talk about it with. But that was the inspiration and drove me to saying, you know what, I got to put my 2 cents in.
Amazing, amazing. And then how does money and love connect in the context of Bitcoin? Let's unpack that a little bit. Yeah, money and love, how does it connect in the context of Bitcoin?
Sure. So, well, the late, great Tina Turner sang the song, What's Love Got to Do with It? And my answer is everything. Because just as we were talking about, I mean, that's really what most of us all want, is we want to feel that experience and we want to share that experience. We get wrapped up in all the other stuff. But if we, again, base our systems recognizing that, if we incorporate the principles of love in our systems, that interconnectedness of life, where we realize, in Christian traditions, they say, what you do to the least of my brother, you do to me. Okay. In Eastern traditions, the same thing. Most have said, you've got to understand that. And so if you recognize that, then you're going to express love to that person on the other side, not just treat them as a transaction and what you can get out of them. So I think, we are on the cusp of the opportunity to create very new systems. I mean, we have an explosion of technology. We have an explosion of the potential for a much greater abundant experience than we've had. Now, it's not going to be easy, but we don't really live in a scarce universe. We have a scarcity of consciousness and our ability to use all the resources out there. I mean, energy is not scarce. The sun produces more energy than we could ever consume, okay, than we could ever experience. And it's the source of all life. So that's not scarce. How we channel it and funnel it and use it for our purposes, that's a function of our consciousness and our technology, what have you. But that's growing tremendously. And what I argue in the book and hope is that if we can shift our monetary system to a fair value system where people are adding value and not extracting it, if prices go down, then life gets easier rather than harder, like it has been for so many people, especially as of late. the time is freed up to then begin to really express our own gifts and talents, to explore whatever it may be, art or music, to create a business, to really add more value rather than just have to go to a job, all right, because you just got to pay the bills. And when we can do that, we can also then begin to explore the deeper meanings of life. I mean, the ultimate question, I think, for all of us is, what's it all about? What's my role here? Okay. How do I fit in this universe that we have moved our understanding, certainly in the West, from the Earth is the center of the universe to realizing we are this little teeny infinitesimal dust speck in the universe. And the technology that this gets into the technology and how that's evolved. So, I mean, technology used to simply be a matter of creating a new tool, which made life a little easier. Creating a hammer made it easier to building a building. Then technology shifted to things that fundamentally changed our perspective of life. So when Galileo created the telescope and looked out and proposed that, in fact, the Earth is not the center of the universe, it reframed our whole value structures. Okay. I mean, it changed our whole conception of who we were on this planet and as human beings to things that are so vast. The human mind, in its logical framework and its daily framework, can't begin to comprehend. Perhaps going a little deeper in meditation, you could begin to tap into that. And I think one can. We're morphing now into a state where technology is no longer necessarily just becoming a tool. It is moving into being a master. And we have to be conscious of that. We have to think about that. Is technology something that we are using for our purposes to fulfill our deeper meaning? Or are we just trying to create more useless data to prove whatever point somebody wants to sell you something with will do for you? I mean, data is so abundant as to be useless. Data is not knowledge, and that certainly is not wisdom.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Very, very good point there. And then just touching on that a little bit. Okay, so do you see Bitcoin as a financial tool or a physiological movement? What do you think?
Yes. It starts as a financial tool, and that's a baseline for how we operate in the world to meet our basic needs. And again, meeting our basic needs is the baseline of life. Whether you use a framework of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs in his pyramid, being able to have food, shelter, and clothing is the base. We should be beyond the base now for most of humanity, and we're not. And I think it's because so many people, instead of adding value, are extracting it. But we have a greater potential, and we need to envision how, in fact, we can do a better job of meeting everybody's base needs so that we can begin to move up that pyramid. So as a financial tool, hopefully it's going to help meet those basic needs more. And then we can begin to look at the more creative desires that we have, the more spiritual endeavors, the more cosmological understanding, the more metaphysical understanding of what our place in the universe is. And so it's a foundational piece that seems to be necessary given the distorted system that we have created, which has so many ill effects that are so little understood.
Yeah. And just touching on that a little bit, yeah. I'm just wondering, what lessons, okay, let's go back a little bit. What lessons from history or economics did you incorporate into your book? Did you bring anything in from previously?
Yeah, so when I started writing this, I basically just sat down and put out the core of my thoughts. And then I realized, no, I want to fill it in with the other references, with lots of history, with different pieces. But my primary emphasis is not a recitation of all of the wonderful Austrian economics or bashing Keynesian economics and all of that. There's tremendous books that have already been written about that. But instead, by defining the problem, the potential solution, the framework of values and love, the issues associated with sovereignty and community, the issues associated with freedom from, but freedom to do, that's important, and wisdom traditions from Toltec wisdom traditions made famous by Don Miguel Ruiz out of the Mexican tradition to the Eastern traditions in yoga, but also philosophical strains from Hannah Arendt and the discussion I had about technology from Neil Postman, who wrote a great book, Technopoly, to Joseph Campbell's analysis of the role of mythology in all cultures throughout the world and how it has provided a framework for values and the hero's journey, the hero being the one who steps outside the normal confines of society to go on a deeper quest. And we all have our own hero's journey, to go on that deeper quest to understand more meaningful things about life and then bring that back and to share that with others. And we've lost so much of that in our cultures and societies when we adopted a very important thing, absolutely, a more scientific methodology. But then we discarded much of the wisdom obtained through other ways, through thousands and thousands of years of humanity, okay, of the value structures upon which we exercise, okay, the tools and the structures and the technologies that we build and the science that we explore. And of course, science ultimately in physics resulted in quantum physics, which, as Einstein said, when I'm confronted with this, and I discuss this in the book, said, it makes no sense. It just does not fit into a Newtonian worldview. That's much like Bitcoin. How could this invisible, vaporous, magic internet money be money when it's not created by a government or anything? It makes no sense. But that's where quantum physics is, and that's where Bitcoin is, and all these different elements of humanity from non-economic fields absolutely fit into it. So I try to weave a thread referencing a lot of materials that you won't usually find in a discussion of Bitcoin or economics textbooks, but we're beginning to see more of it. There's a great book actually I just finished reading. I didn't know it was out there until just a week or two ago. But The Tao of Bitcoin, Scott Dettles wrote a book, and he's looking at Bitcoin within these principles of the Tao from the Chinese philosophy. And it's brilliant. It's wonderful. And so I think we're moving more in that direction, and that's going to help all of us, as well as the leaders in this space, begin to envision deeper systems and pull from lots of different strains of human wisdom throughout the ages. We're a lot smarter, and we've explored a lot more things in the thousands and thousands of years of human history than we are being taught in our schools, when we're simply taught not how to think, but how to get a job and be part of, a cog in the wheel and the productivity machine feeding others.
Yeah, it is very, very true. Very true. And how do you think Bitcoin compares to traditional finance, okay, systems in promoting peace and love? compared to the old, well, compared to the traditional finance system? How does it compare, in your
Yeah.
opinion?
Well, I think the whole peace element is something that'll surprise, a lot of people, and some people have done great work on it. Alex Gladstein has done some great work on it, and many others. But you realize that this perpetual war machine that we seem to be in can only be fueled by manufactured money, that the instigator of the wars, by having never-ending access to the creation of money where the people don't see how they are being taxed through inflation on this money, all right, get to create money. I mean, what a great business to be in, to create a single-use product, a bomb, extraordinarily expensive, that when it gets detonated is gone, and then you have to go in and rebuild it. I mean, it's, I guess, a great fiat extractive business model, but it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And yes, people have conflicts. There will be differences of opinion, okay? But the perpetual war machine that we've created, I mean, US President Dwight Eisenhower talked about it when he left office. And, he was the supreme Allied commander of the forces in World War II. And he warned of the dangers of the military industrial complex. And that foretelling has seemed to be prophecy instead of just warning. And so when you extract the money printer, and I think of it this way, is, that money printer isn't going to die immediately or quickly, but we can begin to starve some of these beasts that have been created, military industrial complex, the healthcare, the educational, by starving the money that is used to fuel them. And if those beasts can begin to shrink and shrink and shrink because they don't have their food of fiat fuel, then we can begin to shift systems. We can begin to free up authentic money to do what I think we all want it to do, which is to serve each other. I mean, if you had to check a box on your tax return, how much extra money do you want to contribute to the war in wherever it? Nobody would do it. And the governments know that. So there are no more war bonds. Okay. I mean, if there was a real genuine threat, the populace would rise up and we would do it. But that's not what's happening. So you have these conflicts that are never ending, that in far off lands that most people are very disconnected to, that more and more are not being fought just with human bodies so that mothers and fathers see their sons dying. I mean, it's absolutely true in many parts of the world, and it's horrible. But as we move to more technology where it's just a video game and we're doing this, uh, you know, that's a real distortion of who we are and can be as humans. So the peace dividend is something that was promised to us but never delivered. And I think Bitcoin can help starve that beast and make a big difference, which is why it's part of the subtitle of my book.
Yeah, yeah. It truly is, yeah. And the more people learn about Bitcoin and they learn about money, they'll understand what we're talking about. Yeah. For some of our veteran uh, viewers on this and people that know about Bitcoin, they totally understand that and they totally get it. But for new people, and that's why I do this as well, Paul. If we can
Absolutely.
save one other person, if somebody can learn what we know about and what has helped us in our lives, that's what it's all about. Yeah. Just spreading the love. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. As I tell people, I said, this is a passion project. You don't make money in books, This isn't about that. This is a passion project. So, the more people that we can inform and educate, help become a little more aware. I like to think of it bends the frame a little bit. You have a nice square rectangular frame and you think you know the picture inside of it. And then you bend the frame a little bit by introducing a concept which that doesn't quite make sense in the normal 90-degree angles that I think of. And you have to begin to adjust your frame a little bit and to think outside the normal confines to recognize, what might be happening here and how do I shift things? How do I contribute to it? And, you know, To me, I think it starts at your personal culture. Okay. You talk about that, I think, and what you're doing to try to do your family and how you operate. It starts at all levels. Are we adding value? Are we extracting it? What are we contributing? How are we operating? Are we operating with a high time preference, a low time preference? Are we, you know, doing activities which improve humanity, or are we doing things which extract from it simply because we can make a buck? Are we turning inside for answers rather than just to the mainstream media and the talking heads? And I think that's where, to me, from a spiritual grounding, for lack of a better word, is another method of inquiry that again has been dismissed. Scientific reasoning and rationality is absolutely critical. And there is another source of knowing things. We all have those intuitive knowings that don't have any particular rationality behind them. You can't cite examples for, but we know something. And in that internal knowingness and awareness, we can then begin operating from a better place and then bring that out into the world. And that's true wisdom. True wisdom is based in experience and a deep knowing, not being told something and adopting it as a belief without really understanding or experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just wondering as well, on your point of view, okay, what practical steps can individuals take to integrate Bitcoin into their daily lives? Do you think? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think because, and having been in the business, the traditional finance that typically dismisses it, but in which everybody understands I have to do something with my money to preserve its value. Just start. And it can seem complicated, but there are so many systems out there that are very easy to begin to accumulate Bitcoin. And once you start with it, then you're almost compelled to learn a little bit more. All right. Because now you own it. You're part of the system. And it makes you have a little bit more of an inquiring mind to say, okay, and you see what happens with it, and you get the experience of, it moving up and down, but over time moving up. And so do that. Begin the journey. As I say, get off zero. Don't start by having to figure it all out, by worrying about multi-sig, custodial, self-custody, and what wallets and all that kind. Just start and buy. You opened a savings account when you were 16 years old to save a little extra money from your job at McDonald's. You didn't worry about a hedge fund, okay? Just start, okay? You don't have to know everything, all right? Nobody will ever know everything about Bitcoin. That's the truth, all right? And you don't have to be a techie or a developer. Just start. And then start trying to extract oneself from a little distance from all the things that you hear about what the source of the problem is, what's going on. Think about why egg prices are going insane. Is it because chickens stopped laying eggs? What's going on here? Okay. Why do a bunch of people in a central bank think they can control the money? Why is that? Now, they sound smart and they go to fancy meetings and they stand in front of flags, but think about it. What are they really doing? All right. Think about the ones who are blaming others and creating wars. What's really happening? Just extract yourself a little bit to think about it. Learn from some different sources. Don't be a victim to just falling into a traditional mindset and saying, oh, if that person did it, it must be wrong. If that person did it, then I disagree with them and they must be wrong. And everybody who thinks like that must be wrong. Be curious. I say this about, I think, one of the most polarized places on the planet right now politically is in the United States. And I'm not going to say one's right or wrong or what have you, but just be curious. Why do so many people feel a certain way that they vote in a certain way? We have to be curious about it. All right. Curiosity means we don't know. And that's the first step in being really wise is admitting you don't know, because generally people are spouting as knowingness what they don't really know. They've just heard. So be curious, be compassionate, you know, think things through a little bit more than just a default framework.
Yeah, yeah, and do your own research. Yeah, as you said,
Yeah,
do
yeah,
it's something that a lot of Bitcoiners do, and people will learn to understand this as they come along this journey. Don't trust, verify for yourself.
yeah,
Start
yeah.
verifying for
And
yourself.
don't believe, know for yourself in whatever
Yeah,
it takes to have that knowingness. And again, I think everybody actually has a knowingness something is wrong here. And it's just thinking about what's the source of it. Maybe it's something different. Spend a little time reflecting on that, thinking about that. And again, develop your own personal culture, develop your own practice in whatever it may be to step outside the world of commerce, whether it's reading, spending, walking in nature, meditating, whatever it is. Go back to something that isn't captured by an algorithm that's trying to feed you something to get you to buy something.
yeah. And something that you touched on earlier on in this conversation, we have everything that we need within us, inside us. Yeah, it all comes from within us. But a lot of people nowadays, and even younger people, maybe don't get that. Yeah. And we've been conditioned to think that the answers are outside, but they're all within us. Everything comes from within us. Yeah? And people need to
Yeah,
start looking in within, yeah, more. And me and Laura
absolutely.
have been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years now. Yeah, looking within, listening to our aura, listening to our mind, not being distracted by the brain. Yeah. And
Yeah,
some people mightn't understand that what we're talking about, but you know what I mean.
absolutely. I mean that's the again, lack of a better term, the spiritual journey that I return to the questions that are much deeper than what's the paycheck going to look like? Because the paycheck is that's not the ends, that's just a means, but it's a means to what? Okay, yeah, it's a means to feed yourself, clothe yourself, and have a place to live. Now what? And that's what's important. And again, the ultimate answer to that, you know, the marketing industry, the advertising industry will be happy to tell you what the meaning of life is, and you can find it when you buy this product, and it will make you happy. But we all know that's not true. And so we need to look beyond that. We know it's not true, and yet we do it. And then we get it, and we're not happy. And then we get the next thing, and we're not happy. And there's part of that perpetual cycle, which is valuable, which is we're not designed to stagnate. We're designed to grow and evolve and to move forward. But it's not just from, a Benz to a Porsche to a Lambo to a Ferrari. That's not the path of evolution. Again, that's fine if you want to have that. But, a fleet of Lambos, as I say in the book, is not going to bring you enlightenment.
It's interesting. Okay. Okay, so if there's one key takeaway, we're going to wrap it up with this. Okay, if there's one key takeaway you want readers to have from your book, what would it be? Yeah. Just try and summarize the core message in a single impactful thought if you can. Yeah.
Understand that Bitcoin is about a whole lot more than money. And actually, it was an honor that Jeff said that that's one of the things that my book does, which is a smart and concise read that explains why Bitcoin is so much more than money if you're curious about that. So just be curious, be open, and to recognize there's something much deeper going on here than some, meme coin, some new, magic internet money or a get rich quick scheme. And begin to realize that the source of what ails us lies in deeper things than what other people are telling us. And yeah, get informed, read books, listen to podcasts, and go deeper. And once you've learned a base level, go the next level. Keep going down that rabbit hole and explore all the burrows and you'll find more than one could ever imagine down there.
Amazing. Amazing. So, Paul, if people want to get your book, where would they get it? Is there websites or is it Amazon? And
Yeah. So, a landing page for me is my website, which is moneyloveandbitcoin.com. That'll tell a little bit more about the book and some of the endorsements. It also has a link to the Amazon US page to buy, as well as a contact form, but it's available on Amazon worldwide. Not all platforms in all countries. Some where there are printing issues, you may not get a print version, but you get a Kindle. But whether it's in Germany or Spain or the US or Canada, Italy, UK, it's out there. So I was pleased that it hit number 3 on the new releases bestsellers with Larry Lepard's big print at number 1, but in a new release. And I'd like to keep that momentum going. So hopefully people will check it out.
yeah, congratulations for that. That's a huge achievement. Good,
Thank
good,
you.
good. Fair play to you. Fair play to you. Okay. And yeah, that's it. We'll catch up with each other again soon. And I don't know, you never know. We might meet each other in person again. We met in Madeira last year.
Yeah,
We might
maybe in
meet
Ireland.
this year in Bitcoin Ireland. You never know.
Yes.
The invitation is there for you. Come over with your
Thank you.
wife. It was amazing meeting the two of yous. And
Thank
come
you.
over and let's have a few Guinness and maybe a few whiskey. Thank you
Wonderful.
for your
Thank
time,
you.
Paul.
Always a pleasure talking with you. I appreciate it. Be well and keep doing the good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Much
Thank you.
love. Much love.
Bye.